So you ready?
Are we ready?
I think we are.
Okay. Okay. Hello, everybody, to our Fireside Chat number 4. Is that number 4 already?
I think
okay.
So, yeah.
The 4th one. We have, I'm very happy to see you all here, all the panelists and all our audience. And yeah, today we have the panelist from the United States with Bruce Barnbaum, from Germany, Stephan Daniel from Leica, Stephan Dowling from the UK, and Albert from Spain, from Carmencita Lab. And yeah, you are Carl Schuler?
Yes, and this is Marwan Elmotzain. He's the editor-in-chief of SilvergrainClassics magazine, and I am the developmental editor of SilvergrainClassics magazine. And we've been hearing from people that not everyone knows our magazine. And as we get more and more people who are interested in these fireside chats, we thought we'd take the opportunity to let you know what we do and why we are here hosting all these important people in the world of analog. So this is a copy of our magazine. Oh, I see that that's already gone up there. That's our most current edition right there. And yeah, we have the slogan, the entire world of analog, but it's not just a slogan, I have to say. It's really, it's something that we feel very passionate about. We sell magazines to literally every continent in the world. I see Bruce has his dog up with him now. We sell magazines to literally every continent in the world. We've even had magazines taken to Antarctica, which I think is really cool. So could we start the slideshow? Right. And we also have contributors from all over the world. And it's what part of my job, actually the main part of my job, is to make sure that our content is balanced. And so we have a whole bunch of different nationalities, ethnic groups. We are careful about gender balance in our contributors. And we also have very famous names, Ansel Adams, Edward Weston, Sugimoto, but also a lot of complete unknowns. And we are very proud to be able to represent such a wide spectrum of photographers. But in addition to just the different artists that we have, we also cover a lot of different subjects. So we have different formats of photography. We do techniques and gear and things like that. Next time, we also do cinematography. Our next fireside chat is going to be about cinematography. We'll talk a little bit about that at the end, I think. But I think it's one of the things, oh, there's some Leicas. I think one of our guests tonight might recognize those cameras, at least one. Yeah, but we really love to bring the entire world of film photography and film photographers together in our magazine. And I think we have some things that just about everybody likes. Like right there, you can see Jeff Bridges, the dude, and who doesn't like a Polaroid? So we really try to do things that bring the world of analog photography together. And so that is basically what our magazine is about. And we're quite passionate about it being a printed magazine and not an online thing. We do have some online content, which is great, but it's completely different. That's our blog. And it's 100 pages each time. And I don't know if you can see this, but it's really heavy paper. And the reproductions we take a lot of pride in the printing and stuff. So that's our magazine. But now moving on to what everybody's actually here to see today, that's our panelists. Oh, I forgot, I was gonna say at the very beginning, the one category I didn't really put in that slideshow was large format landscape photography, because one of our guests this evening has been a contributor since the very beginning, and he's going to show you his large format photographs, which are just amazing. So I didn't want to waste any time and take away from his images that he's going to show us. But we're going to start today with Abad Roig. He's joining us from Spain, and he is the force behind Carmencita Film Lab. And you can see right there on the slide, it's a pretty impressive undertaking that he's done there. He's got, they've processed over 250,000 films since they started the lab. And they do all the work for the fashion brand Zara, which I think a lot of people will be familiar with. So welcome, Abed. We're so happy to have you here.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure for me to be here. I feel a bit like the new kid on the block, but it's I'm so happy that you guys counted on us to participate.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and about Carmencita and what you do?
Okay, so basically we are a company based in Valencia, Spain. We started in late 2013 after the crisis. And it was basically out of the need as me and my partner to find a reliable lab that we could process and scan film, because we both worked professionally with film, both 35 and medium format. Eventually, we were sending our film out to the US. That's where I first worked in 2012. But my partner had some experience with labs, so we decided to give it a try. And we always thought it would be like this little thing. It would be like maybe 3 people working full time at some point, developing and scanning film, for always thinking about Europe, never thinking about, because in Spain, it was not a big thing back then. So we were always thinking about this European collective of photographers. And we couldn't be more wrong. It was like after 2 years, we were doubling numbers. And it was kind of crazy to deal with that. I started with 23. I was at 26, 27 years old. I was dealing with 20 people on staff. Kind of overwhelming, but it's been amazing to see how we were able to pack a team, and how photographers from all over, the same as you guys, we got emails from all over the world asking to both questions about film and how to process and how to send the film and if it was okay, and trying to give confidence for people. And so far so good. Now we are expanding a little bit to locally to Barcelona and also to Portugal, and there is a few more things possible opening up, which are super exciting to see how the photography, like film photography especially, is going, in our case, from the professional sphere to the more like aficionados or like regular enthusiast, which is amazing. But I think it's gonna keep it, what's gonna keep it alive eventually. So I hope there is a great future.
So when 2020, I mean, that was also a horrible year for you guys, or how did you experience
2020? What happened? So yeah, it was rough. Saying something else would be a lie, but it was not as bad as we hoped or we expected, because it's true that most of our professional clients saw their volume going down drastically. Of course, all the events, a lot of editorials were canceled because of traveling and so on. So we can say that some of our biggest accounts, or like photographers that we were working for, disappeared. I mean, not disappeared, they're still alive, but they are or either working locally in some other part of the world or something else. But it was amazing. And actually also we tried to output content during the pandemic for people, like free, for people to see and learn and keep busy and showing the lab inside every week. And we saw a major response on like day shooters and non-professional shooters that kept us alive really, really, really well, far more than we can expect it. So it's been a very interesting shift. We hope that this year a lot of professional work will come back, since things are a bit easier, but it's been not compensated, but in I would say a 50-60% balance of the volume we used to have kept alive because of like enthusiasts and people who love photography and love to ship their film to us and trust us to process it.
So 2021, you are definitely expanding your work.
Yes, we see a major, I don't know if my colleagues here, both participants will agree, but we see a major shift in local scenes, like especially in major cities. We see that it's booming, the interest for film. And we feel like it's not always easy for everybody to ship their film to us, which sometimes purchasing gear or film, it's easier to buy it online and you wait for it to come. But when the photographer has to do the opposite, like to pack their film and ship it away, it's a bit more difficult. So we say like, okay, if the photographers are not shipping their film, even if they would like to, but you know, things happen, we say, okay, let's try to get closer to them. And what we are trying to do is partnering up with both local independent businesses or professionals that we know in areas, and partnering with them to open in the city. It's not like we having a map and saying we are gonna be here, but usually we have a relationship with somebody, for example, in Lisboa or in Barcelona or in Milan or in Helsinki maybe, that say, okay, we are doing this, would be okay to merger. We studied and we go through it. So, but it's really been amazing to bring our know-how and our customer experience in a way to local photographers, which sometimes they feel they are like stuck with whatever there is in the city, you know.
I saw a picture of you guys in front of your store, and I was surprised how young the average person looked there. So I think how many people you are? 20, you said 20 people approximately?
So at the moment we are 13 in Valencia, 2 people in Lisboa, and one and a half in Barcelona. So that's our staff at the moment, and we are I would say the average age is around 30 something. We have some people on their early 20s, which is like, it's amazing to see like new generations coming. And then I think the eldest member is 40 at the moment. So I'm kind of in the middle. So I'm 31. So yeah.
Well, that is amazing. And it's interesting to see that young people also invest into the future of analog film. Yeah, just thank you, Albert. And I think we just shift over from young to experienced. Well, we have here Bruce Barnbaum from the United States. And we have to say that we're very, very glad to have him here, especially that he is definitely a legend in film photography and also in darkroom work. And our magazine is also, his DNA is also in our magazine, because he writes from the first magazine issue as a contributor. And yeah, whenever you have seen him working in the lab, it's kind of like, yeah, having seen an artist producing something. Well, his work is in galleries all over the world, and he wrote 6 books, including The Art of Photography and The Essence of Photography. Especially The Art of Photography should have been mentioned as an extreme successful book that was released in 2010 in the first edition, I think. And between then and now, as an analog book, it was sold more than 100,000 copies. It's now in the 2nd or the 3rd edition. Is it the 2nd edition, Bruce? The 2nd, okay. So, well, and he is also an environmental advocate because he loves nature, and you can see that in his pictures. Well, Bruce, so how do you do? Thank you for being here. And what was your impression in 2020? I think it was your 50th year as a photographer.
First, let me say this. I have to apologize for the fact that I am on a satellite connection. Out where I live, there is no cable, so there is often a delay in what I hear and then what other people hear because of what comes into me and what goes out from me. So I will ask all listeners and the rest of our panelists to please be patient because there is this delay. It's only about 3 or 4 seconds, but that seems like an eternity. Okay, you asked about 2020. Let me go back just a little bit so that you could understand where I'm coming from on this. At the end, toward the end of 2017, I had a shoulder replacement operation. Had a new shoulder put in. It's working, but it's not working fully. At the end of 2019, I had both of my hips replaced. So I'm at this point, nothing but a bunch of spare parts. The hip replacement has been fantastic. I am walking, I'm climbing stairs, I'm out in our field. We live on 20 acres of forested land. I was out doing some chainsaw working the other day. I'm jogging up to 4 or 5 kilometers per jog. No pain, no problem whatsoever. And I'm looking forward to the time that my workshops begin again and I could do my backpacking workshop down into the Utah canyons. 2020 forced me to cancel all of my workshops. It happened just about the time that I was really getting mobile again from the hip operations. So what happened to me was really quite interesting. While I was recuperating from the hip operations in early 2020, I couldn't go anywhere because I was immobilized somewhat. And I started reviewing old contact proofs all the way back to 1970 when I took an Ansel Adams workshop in Yosemite. And I started reviewing contact proofs of negatives, 4x5, right from immediately after that workshop. And I continued this in a very systematic way, just working chronologically, hoping that perhaps along the way I could find a gem or two that I had overlooked, or maybe one that I had even printed long ago, but I didn't print successfully. Well, to my amazement, it has turned into a treasure trove. And 2020 proved to be the most productive year in my entire life. Printing almost exclusively these older negatives that I've rediscovered, some of which I remembered, some of which I just didn't remember at all. I had to look up my old notes, where I even was, where I took those things. So it has continued now into 2021. So actually at this moment, I'm trying to convince my publisher, Rocky Nook, to do a book that has entered my mind that I'm tentatively thinking of as being titled 2020 and Vicinity. And basically it would be all of these photographs that I first printed successfully starting last year and now slopping over into this year. So it's been a remarkable thing, even though I've had to cancel all the workshops, which of course has been a blow to me in many ways, financially and otherwise. I love meeting the people that come to the workshops. They're really good. And I love going to the places where the workshops are. They're just always gorgeous. But being home here on my 20-acre plot of land and with my 3 puppies, Andre, Maury, come back up here. You gotta, for people who missed this, Maury, come on up here. Come on, jump up. There we go. See this guy over here? This is one of the loves of my life. We have 3 dogs. He is Maury. He's a French shepherd called a Briard, Berger de Brie. Being here on our 20 acres locked down is kind of like being imprisoned in paradise.
Well, I think that we should start to go through some of your pictures, if you don't mind. I think that maybe we can start the presentation so that people can see what we're talking about for those who don't know you.
Marvin and Karis asked me to send them 6 photographs. And we talked about this the other day, and I said I would send 6 of those that I'm most well known for. And then I would also send 3 of the very brand new ones. So 3 of the older ones and 3 of the new ones. This photograph right here that I titled Circular Chimney Antelope Canyon is unquestionably my own personal favorite photograph of anything that I've ever photographed. This is the result of the most emotional experience that I ever had in my life, walking into Antelope Canyon in northern Arizona. I went in with a friend, and I won't give all the background of that, but the moment I walked into this place, I was absolutely unable to speak. The emotional impact of it just rendered me mute. I was unable to talk. And I remember walking slowly through this place, and in many places, kind of feeling our way because it got dark in places and walls were sweeping in and out in a canyon that is roughly 80 feet or about 25 or 30 meters deep. And in places you could touch the walls on both sides. So it's effectively like a cave with a skylight up above. And in many cases, the opening at the top is narrower than where we were walking down below. And I remember in the muted experience of mine, looking at this particular structure and saying, there's my first photograph tomorrow. I walked in there without a camera. It was late in the afternoon. It was starting to get dark. So I didn't even expect to find this place. I had no camera with me. The next morning, we were actually planning to go back home to Los Angeles, where I lived at the time. But I said, no, I am not going to go back home first thing in the morning. I have to come back here. What was it about this that was so emotional? Well, going back to my earlier background was in mathematics and physics. And really, quite honestly, my goal in life was to be the next Einstein or Feynman or something like that, studying subatomic particles and the subatomic forces and going all the way up to the galactic forces. And what this photograph represents to me is actually exactly that. That large black form that you see could be the nucleus of an atom, and what's swirling around it is the cloud of electrons. Alternatively, it could be the black hole at the center of every galaxy and the galaxy spinning around it. So basically, when I walked in here, not only was I just completely blown out by what I saw, but it actually brought back my whole life to me from mathematics and physics. And this was the metaphor of that. And the other day I had to reprint it because I had an order. It was the first time in several years I had printed it. And boy, did it give me a good feeling. So this is a very, very special photograph for me. We could go to the next one. Okay, this is one that I call Elegant Dune, Death Valley. I had been in Death Valley back in the 1970s and had made a few photographs, including one that I still show today. And then I hadn't been there for almost a quarter century until about 2000. And I went back there and found it to be really quite amazing. I did a workshop there. And afterwards, I thought the sand dunes themselves, basically in the center of Death Valley, which is a huge place, is particularly interesting to me. So 2 years later, when we did another workshop, I went a few days early just to do some of my own photography, specifically on the sand dunes. And I started wandering around, starting at about noon, and I really wasn't finding anything. And I was starting to think, maybe I was wrong. Maybe there really isn't much on the sand dunes. And at that point, I was just climbing up a low ridge of sand, And I got to the top and I went, oh! Because this photograph, this is what I saw in front of me on the other side of that ridge. And I just went, oh my God, I was right. And I set up my camera right there, and just the magnificent sweeps and swirls in here is what just captivated me. And I've spent a huge amount of time since then working on the dunes in Death Valley, and have a whole portfolio of photographs from there. Let's go to the next one. Okay, on my screen, this looks a little bit light, but this is my most popular photograph of all time. This was actually made way back in 1973, Basin Mountain approaching storm. This is on the eastern side of the Sierra Nevada mountains. I had gone up to the little town of Bishop below this area to do a short weekend workshop, which is really what led to my workshop programs. This was for the Sierra Club, the environmental organization. And I woke up in the morning early to have breakfast and then meet the students. And I walked out of my motel room and saw the clouds over the mountains and said, the hell with breakfast. I got to get to a place where I could get away from the power lines and billboards and all this other junk in this town. And I quickly threw my camera equipment into the trunk of my car, went just north of town, found this meadow and corral and the old cowboy fence over there. And I said, this is perfect. Set up my camera literally right behind the trunk of my car, looking across the road to Basin Mountain, which is the mountain right there in the center. And subsequently, this became, and has basically almost always been, my most popular image. Okay, let's go on. And the next three are going to be the newer ones. And these were arbitrarily chosen just from over 100 new things that I have found and printed in the darkroom, 16 by 20. This is quite an odd looking situation that you have over here. And I'll just call it Enigma. I won't tell you what it is, but it is something that I found, set up in my house and photographed. Some people say, well, you should tell us what it is. Well, I'm not going to lie, but on the other hand, you don't necessarily have to blurt out the truth. So I'll just leave it as an abstract enigma. Next one. Back in the mid 80s, I was beginning to photograph some urban areas, really starting in Calgary, Canada, which has a magnificent downtown. And the set of photographs actually became part of my first book. My first book, published in 1986, Visual Symphony, has 4 sections to it, or 4 movements that go along with the movements of the typical symphony. And movement number 3 was titled Urban Geometrics. And in it, I show primarily a number of the interesting geometric interactions among huge downtown buildings in cities around the US and into Canada, most of which are ugly buildings. They're giant file boxes, but together in the aggregate, they form some interesting geometric complexes. And along the way, I also photographed a number of images that never made it into the book, that I suddenly came across in my review of old negatives and started putting them aside. This being one, you're primarily looking at reflections. So everything that you're seeing here is distorted in the window reflections. And I've put together an enormous group that I call urban enigmas. And this is one of them. This happens to be from Denver in Colorado. And I have just a whole bunch of things that never made it into the book, but now hopefully could make it into this new book that I'm hoping that my publisher will decide could be an interesting book. And let's go to the last one. Hello, whoever is doing it. There we go. Okay. Another abstract. Let me just say something about this. I call this one flow, just flow. And I may or may not say more about it. Among the discoveries that I've come across in going through these old images are very abstract images like this one and like that first one that I showed that I didn't say much about. But in addition to landscapes and all sorts of other things, I came across a number of abstracts way back in the 70s and almost into the early 80s. Whenever I would show abstract photographs, the audience had no interest whatsoever. They wanted to see more landscapes. They wanted more photographs like Basin Mountain Approaching Storm that I showed you. And when I would show an abstract, there was almost no reaction. That changed dramatically at the end of 1979 when I brought a workshop group into the home of Brett Weston, and he showed us a bunch of his photographs, all of which were abstract. And it completely changed my attitude toward abstraction. Going into Brett Weston's house, I always thought that abstraction was a bother, a pain, an imposition on the audience. Walking out of Brett Weston's house an hour and a half later, I felt that abstraction was a puzzle. People can decide if they could solve the puzzle or not. It's their problem. It's not mine. And what happened was just 4 months after walking out of Brett Weston's house, I walked into Antelope Canyon, and that first photograph that I showed of Circular Chimney, Antelope Canyon, was the first photograph I made. Abstract as could be, I never had any hesitation about it. This right here, I will tell you what it is. I probably shouldn't, but I will. It's the beginning of mixing some paint. I was going to paint a new room in the house. I started mixing the paint. I saw this pattern and I went, oh my God, this is incredible. And I just photographed the top of the paint can. The paint inside the can, I should say. So there it is. So that's just called flow.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing all of that, Bruce. I mean, we are obviously huge fans of your work. I have a huge print of yours in my living room. So it's always special to see your work here. Thank you. And thanks for joining us. We have to move on to Stephan Dowling. Boy, Bruce is a tough act to follow, but we'll do our best, won't we? So yeah, Stephan is the force behind Cosmo Photo. Maybe we can bring up his slide. There we go. So yeah, you can kind of read a little bit about Stephan right there. Yeah, he is also a photographer besides being in an online analog force and having his own line of films now. I think he has over 150 cameras himself, all of which work.
That's all?
That's all. Yeah, someday we'll have to count Mavan's photos and tell everybody about that. But anyway, yeah, Cosmo Photo actually began as Zorky, as you can see there. And he's been doing very, very well. And I know he has some very interesting plans for the future. So Stephan, welcome. And we're looking forward to hearing about you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Yeah, it's weird. I remember taking a break from work about 2004. and traveling across Russia on the Trans-Siberian with a backpack full of old Soviet cameras, because that was one of the things that I became a bit obsessed about. And the idea of sort of traveling across Russia and shooting on these old Russian cameras, and thinking, this is kind of what I would love to be doing full time at some point. With, you know, at that stage, I didn't have the blog, I didn't have the film, but it was a couple of years ago. I remember it was almost as if I was transported back to that memory, and I was like, okay, I'm kind of doing that now. It's weird how sort of life reminds you of those funny little moments. Yeah, so Cosmo Photo, it used to be called Zorky Photo, was a blog that I set up in 2010 after already a decade of shooting on film cameras of all shapes and sizes, though not large format, because I don't think I have the patience. And I just wanted to make a record of the kind of stuff that I had been shooting, but also what I'd learned along the way. And I know when we were talking yesterday, just the members on the panel, if I think back to 2010, that was a kind of a rough time for film photography. It came on the back of a lot of things happening that seemed to show analog photography sort of shrinking or dwindling. And you compare that to now, and I think we're in a much healthier position. But yeah, it was a blog aimed at, you know, maybe people who were new to film, who wanted to find out different cameras. And then in 2016, after Bellamy Hunt, who I know writes for SilvergrainClassics, when he launched Street Pan 400, it was like a lightning bolt. And I thought, why don't I try and do a film as well? So this was the first film in the Cosmo Photo family, Mono, which is made by the wonderful people at Foma Bohemia in the Czech Republic. And I set it up essentially from the spare bedroom at home. In 2019 came the 120 version. Ooh, get him the right way up. And in the last 3.5 years, I've sold nearly 50,000 rolls of film all around the world. So it stopped North America, people like Freestyle in the States, Japan, Hong Kong, all the way back to New Zealand, where I'm from. And I've had people buying it, just like private customers through the blog, and I think Greenland down to Chile. So it's great to see how a film like this sort of travels around the world.
How do you get the impressions or the inspiration for the design? Because it's this communist, typical communist design, which is really cool.
So I think I was always sort of slightly interested in that part of the world, even as a sort of a teenager, sort of growing up on a farm in New Zealand. Where I grew up sounds kind of similar to where Bruce lives. I grew up on a farm that had a pine forest in the middle of New Zealand. And back in the day, of course, the Soviet Union, Eastern Europe was very much, you know, hard to get into. And you would occasionally get these products that would come out of it that, you know, would have this amazing graphic art. And when I got into film photography properly in around 2000, I became interested in looking at, you know, especially East German and Soviet cameras, and then understanding that at its height, the Soviet Union had the second largest camera industry in the world, next to Japan. So as a rabbit hole, it's a pretty interesting one to go down, because there's just all sorts of things that they made, some of which were, you know, very hard to find outside the Warsaw Pact. Some became like very, very common cameras. And along with that, you had this amazing school of graphic art from the 1950s through to the 1980s, not just in the USSR, but Poland, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, East Germany. And the more I collected cameras, like you see it on the boxes and in the manuals, and seeing other art from the time on matchboxes or Aeroflot posters, things like that. I just thought it was really interesting and not something I really had much experience of. So when it came to producing the film, my mate does art, who's my friend Martin, who did all the graphic design. I sort of talked to him about the ideas I had, and he knew exactly what I was talking about. So when he did the first sort of design drawings of it, I was like, well, this is perfect. And I'm really happy that a lot of people have remarked upon how bold and interesting the graphic design looks, because I think it does stand out. And I had a really nice moment, I think it was last year or the year before, walking into a camera shop in London, and there was a woman in front of me who was buying some film, and she just pointed towards Mono with the cosmonaut, and she was like, I don't know what that is, but I want to buy a roll of it. So I felt
the design is very, very important nowadays, and I think
felt very happy.
Think about that. And that's the secret also of the Cosmo films. I think there are some things coming. Maybe we talk later on the chat, or what do you think?
So I have a mystery launch, which I don't know if people are aware of, but I put out a few teasers.
I think we should cheat that to the chat later on, because that is a kind of thing we should go more into detail.
Yeah, cool.
In the meanwhile, I think we should switch to our next guest, Stephan Daniel, and who is, I'm not sure if your job description is the same like Oscar Barnack in a way or another, but it already tells us what he's doing. As a hint, he's there in Leica for 36 years. People inside the company told me that his nickname is Mr. M, because he's also involved in a lot of activities concerning the M model and many others. He is also, that's what we heard, responsible that a lot of parts in the production survived for the M Leica. And he's now here. And I'm sure a lot of people have a lot of questions concerning the Leica product. But Stephan, thank you for being here. Maybe you just can give us an idea about 2020 and how is Leica's point of view of the analog world nowadays?
Yeah, welcome to everybody. It's really funny because 2020, when it started in March with the first lockdown, we at Leica were really a bit scared because the shops were closed, our own retail stores, and we also had to put down the factory for about 5 weeks. And so we had a lack of supply. And also there were some supply chains not working anymore. So we kind of lost roughly 8 weeks in operation. But when we got everything back working again, I have to say it has been, for what terrible year it is, it really turned out to be a good year for Leica. So people really seem to enjoy photography, not only analog, but also digital. So far, Leica is doing, keep my knock on wood, we're doing well. So after all, 2020 has not been such a bad year. We had a good number of new products, which also gave us a nice tailwind. So, and I have to say that our Portugal factory, despite the very difficult situation in Portugal, is still up and running. They take great care of hygiene measures and so on, as well as the factory in Germany. So I keep my fingers crossed that it will remain like this. Yeah. Yeah, so I'm with Leica since I can't believe it myself, because I'm more than 35 years with Leica. And I actually started back in 1984. And I've been maybe 4 weeks with the company. So in the beginning of September 1984, as an apprentice of mechanics, the master came and showed the brand new M6 even before it was launched on Photokina 84. So as a boy of 16, I felt pretty proud seeing that camera before its launch. So so I'm my age at Leica is as old as the M6. And during that time, over the years and decades, the company changed a lot from being quite a big company, very traditional. Then the first digital cameras came along and gave us a hard time, I have to say, like many other companies. And especially the bigger companies, you could name Agfa, Kodak, Minolta, they all went kind of out of business, and but somehow we managed to stay in business. And I have to say that thanks to the first digital M, the M8, which gave us really a good takeoff, and later on by the M9, we were really able to survive and grow a new business in digital. But we always produced without interruption also our analog M models. I brought an MP here, which is in production since 2000 and there you go, since 2003. What is really surprising, or was surprising for us in the first year, is like 4 or 5 years we see a tremendous trend towards analog photography. So the demand of our analog cameras is going up and up. So there's a little anecdote maybe I'll tell you. We did build a new factory in Portugal where a good bunch of the pre-production takes place. And this was back in 2012. And so the managers of this plant did not want to take over the machinery for the analog M's into the new, beautiful, clean factory, because this is machinery from the 1930s to 1950s. And it's like a museum, more or less. And so I had quite a hard fight to convince them that we could continue producing analog cameras also inside the new factory in Portugal. So we managed it, and since then really we enjoying sales going up, thanks to people who really like to work with analog M's. And the same is true, as you all know, for the secondhand market, for the vintage products, that it's really seems to be not just a short-term trend, but a long-term movement. And as Bruce said yesterday in our little pre-chat, no form of art has ever disappeared because there was a new one coming after. And I think that's true for analog photography as well. So,
you can see, especially with the used prices that going up, especially I think nowadays you have to pay for an M3 the price that it cost new when it was in German marks at the time, now in euro, at least if it's in good state.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. Even a bit more, I would say. Yeah.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, there were, I think, some rumors. Should we leave the rumors to the chat later, or?
I don't know. We'll see if there are any questions. But
is there something you would like to say, maybe?
No product announcement tonight.
Well, we were going to just maybe move on to chat among ourselves. So if all the panelists want to unmute their microphones so we can kind of all speak whenever we have something to say. One of the interesting things that I thought was brought up yesterday when we met for the first time was that we all see this resurgence of tactile things. We were talking about vinyl records and print magazines and film. And I think it's really, really interesting that everybody sees that from their different corners of the world. So maybe you guys want to share what you were saying a little bit yesterday about what you see there.
Yes, if you allow me to go first.
Please.
I don't know if
Sure.
Bruce. Okay, sorry. I think what Bruce said was completely true, and what I was mentioning earlier yesterday was that at least what we see, and perhaps Stephen can agree with this, is a vast amount of young people that's being driven by the analog experience. And that is not shooting because of nostalgia, but it is shooting because they find something new and interesting. And I think it's what's gonna keep film alive in a way. And I think for me, as I studied art history and a bit of photography and painting, it's I believe at the end, digital photography made to film photography what photography made to painting at the beginning. So it's kind of freeing painting from being hyper realistic and representing reality as detailed as possible. Photography covered that back in the day, and people were paying like 50 times more for a picture than a portrait in a way. I think the same will happen to film, like digital freed photography from having to be fast, grainless, able to have an ISO of 3000 or something. And it moved it to perhaps a bit more artistic or like impressionistic realm of interpreting reality. So I think for me, that's what we see and that's what we work for, at least. And I would love for everybody to give also their input on this.
Yeah, I totally agree. My mother was an art history teacher, so I'd only repeat that. I think film photography is in its impressionism phase in the 21st century, and it's you look at how impressionism is still popular, and people pore over it because each person who will go to one of those paintings by Monet or whoever will see something something extra to what is on the canvas. Yeah, I'm blown away by how much more I see film becoming a part of people's everyday, and agreeing with Albert again, I think it's young people, it's people who are too young to have shot film the first time round, who are kind of at the vanguard. And I know lomography gets a bit of stick from certain quarters, but I think they've had a massively positive effect because they made film photography relevant to younger people. And that's that sort of baton of making film photography relevant and interesting and emotionally resonant to younger people has sort of been passed over to Instagram as well, where I did a long read on Cosmo Photo last year to mark the 10th anniversary of Instagram, and just how much film photography I see on Instagram now that it's a bit more of a democratic platform. You're able to put landscape photos, for instance. When that happened, I instantly saw so much more film photography on that platform. And I think it's, you know, it's bad in one sense, in that the price of secondhand cameras is shot through the roof. But it's massively increased the number of younger photographers who want to try film, and it's not a fad. It's, you know, the people who seek it out are in it for the long term, I think.
We often hear that people are, especially after 2020, people have been spending a lot of their lives cooped up with their screens. And what they're really excited to do is get something real in their hand. And you know, film photography is definitely a part of that. And I think it's a wonderful development for all of us that we have it, development.
It brings also an interesting point, especially about the tactile appearance of a photograph, and especially when you see Bruce's images directly on a photographic paper, then you are stunned how much life it is in that paper. I think Bruce, who wanted to say something, he just raised his hand before Stephen spoke.
I can't remember what it was, but let me just say something about photography concerning kind of a historical point of view. If you look at the history of painting, all the way back to the caves in Spain and now Indonesia, that they're finding even older cave paintings and so on and so forth, and almost up to about 1860, 1870, you will find that in its day, painting was very realistic. You had portraits, you had landscapes, so on and so forth. And starting about 1860, 1870, 1880, something radically changed in painting. And suddenly you had Impressionism and Pointillism and Dadaism and Cubism and Campbell soup canism and all that sort of stuff. What is it that changed painting so radically? It was photography. Photography came along and was better at realism. So all of a sudden, much of the realistic painting changed. And what's happened since then, you look at the initial critical reviews of all of those isms that I mentioned, and they were horrible. Everybody hated every one of them, and Fauvism was the worst of all. They hated that stuff, but eventually it became accepted. And with the exception came praise. And with the praise, it fed back on photography, and the realism of photography became passé, wasn't important anymore. So photography had to turn to abstraction and other forms that we're seeing today. And it's a very interesting interaction between photography and painting, I would say, over the last 150 years, to see how one and the other have influenced the other.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, that brings us a little bit also back to the manufacturers of cameras, especially coming back to Leica, because you just notice whenever you visit the Lights Park in Wetzlar, you notice that that Leica puts the image into the center of all its creative work in terms of engineering cameras around it. So the image is the most important part in Leica's focused work. Yeah, now we just noticed that a lot of people just asking about it. We get bombarded with questions. I guess
we should probably move on to the question segment. It looks like we're going to run a little overtime today. We'll apologize to everybody in advance, but it's been such a great discussion. But Stephan, yes, we kind of already did this. You're not going to make any big announcement today, but I wanted to let you know that someone said, thank you for Leica's continued commitment to producing film cameras when the overwhelming majority have abandoned them. And so that's a big thanks from our audience. And then can you speak more about the possibility of a budget M-mount rangefinder? So I don't know if you can give us any sort of hint or feeling.
Or would you say it's totally impossible that a new M-mount rangefinder will come on the market? So
Of course, we'll have new M-mount rangefinders, but I think primarily they will be digital.
okay.
Yeah. So,
and if,
but you should never say never. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
A few words to Lightspark maybe is really that. Yeah, this was a bad thing about 2020 because our museum, where we have beautiful exhibitions, the 40 years of the Leica Oscar Barnard Award pictures being exposed, at the time being not accessible, unfortunately. But this is really something you can really deep dive into photography. That is really beautiful, and we all at Leica love photography, and that is our motivation and our motor, also for developing the product, because they're tools for photographers. Yeah, talking about the new camera is always a bit difficult because we have a policy that we try not to speak too much in advance. But talking about, there was a question, I think, what is a budget M rangefinder? A budget M rangefinder is a used one, and a budget Leica is always a used one.
But I think that could be also a very important answer, because if Leica is, for example, supporting service and maintenance and trying the best in order to support existing models that were produced nearly half a century ago to be serviced and maintained, what you're doing, I think that's also a very, very good commitment to film photography so far. And what for me would be an interesting question too is, how is the situation of technicians like you, for example, having the knowledge and the skills, service and maintaining very complicated mechanical instruments? I think that is one of the points where we just noticed, well, everybody is able to write an application on a mobile phone, but it's difficult to repair, let's say, your sink at home. You know, and so, and especially coming to a Leica, I think that's really rocket science in this case, mechanical rocket science.
Yeah, it's I think with a decent training and some patience and listening to the masters, it's always possible. So in our repair shop, we have a very good mixture between people who really lived in the analog era and take it there, but also we train younger people being able to service all the products. The good thing is that on a today's MP, which is basically from the structure an M2 of 1958. So there are many pieces which are still today in production, which go into a 1960s or 70s M Leica. So that is also, by the way, I would say, I think without example, that a product in its basic structure, how the layout is made and the whole things is in production for over 60 or 65 years. But that shows that the guys back in 1954 had quite a good idea and know what they're doing.
We also notice an increasing demand, especially for the R Leica models. So because there are fans of the R Leica, and especially, well, me too, yeah. But as I know, is that the R3 till the R7 can be serviced. I think Pepken in Germany, they do a very good job. They said also to us that they have more than enough spare parts even for the years to come. There are not really big limitations. Is there any possibilities, especially as you can use R lenses on a new Leica SL, for example, with an adapter, even with digital, and you also get great performance? Is there maybe a possibility that there will be some support in the future about the R system? Because I mean, the R system is more or less not really the one that you are working on anymore.
Yeah, that you know that there was a time when interest in R Leicas was almost non-existing anymore,
yeah.
And also reflected by the second-hand prices. You could get an R3 for almost nothing. Yeah. On the one hand, this was a good chance to get one and enjoy it with film. So at the time, we have no concrete plans because, as you said, Pepke is doing a great job. But it really depends if it really takes off like something, we might consider doing that back again as well. Yeah.
Great.
I have to mention, I started my career in the service department repairing R3s. Yeah, but
I don't know what you're talking about. I will just follow up that thing. Not get rid of me.
He will too. I'm warning you. But I have a question here for Bruce that was submitted from the audience. And someone was saying that they've read The Essence of Photography and found it very inspirational and have started reading The Art of Photography and find it insightful, especially when picking apart and thinking critically about elements of composition. But they find it not only insightful, but also frustrating because they feel like they're compelled to reevaluate their own work. And he was asking, do you have any advice for someone who is rediscovering themselves through their own work, especially at a kind of fundamental compositional level?
I really don't know what to say. I don't know the person, so I don't know the person's work. What I can say, perhaps, which is really what I try to say in my, there's the German version of The Art of Photography. What I try to say to people who are trying to, you might say, find where they want to go is concentrate on what's interesting to you. For me, I started in photography because I was hiking and traveling around and photographing the landscape. And that's what brought me into photography. And I have continued to photograph the landscape because this is our environment. We live in it. It nurtures us. It's the most important thing. So those are the things that are of interest to me, and that's where I'm going to make my best photographs. If you look at the work of Diane Arbus, she photographed, you might say, misfits in society. That's what interested her. And that's why those photographs are so incredibly powerful. I could not possibly go into that realm and make anything of value. It's not the kind of subject matter that means something to me. But when I see what she has done with it, it means a whole lot to me because she really has imparted that interest and that love for that. So you have to just really concentrate on what is it of interest to you and then go for it.
I have another short question for you, Bruce. Someone says they love your work and wants to know what is your weapon of choice. They're guessing 4x5 or larger. So let us know quickly, what do you use? What's your equipment?
4x5. I've never gone larger. I basically, once I got, you might say, into photography where I was actually developing my own negatives and making my own prints, I went from my 35mm camera that I was using just to shoot color slides. I went to medium format immediately. I've never actually exposed a 35 millimeter black and white negative. I just decided right from the very beginning, for whatever reason, I wanted a larger negative. And then I was thinking of going to larger than 2¼ square. It turns out that where I was working at the time as a math analyst and computer programmer at a place called Aerospace Corporation in the Los Angeles area, a fellow down the hall had a 4x5 Linhof camera that he wasn't using, and he sold it to me. So I very quickly had gone to 4x5. I've never gone larger. That first camera was a Linhof. The long story, I'll just say it was stolen. I bought a new Linhof in 1979. That's my camera.
That's great.
Cameras is a good point. Again, yeah, we're overwhelmed with Leica questions. Point and shoot cameras are, especially among young people, very famous. Prices are also exploding, especially after Kendall Jenner just announced that she has a Contax. Now, Leica had beautiful point and shoot cameras in their portfolio back in the days. Is there a chance that you can bring back point and shoot cameras for a film?
That's, you know, even if if we would like to do so, it would be a huge investment, because tooling, and I would say even the infrastructure for the lenses and so on, it doesn't exist anymore. Mm-hmm. So that, because it was a completely dead segment, and to make it somehow affordable, you would need to do some plastic molding and things, toolings, jigs, and so on. So that's quite unlikely that at least Leica will go back, because it's still, yeah, not sure how many we will really be able to move. So that is kind of a risk for a company. But we observe that very closely, and people are asking for the mini lux to come back, and yeah, all that. So maybe there's a future for that as well.
Well, Carmencita, I just remember that we got in contact last month or 2 months ago about Super 8, remember? Yes. There are plans from your side going into motion picture development?
So yeah, we've always, like, I think it's since Kodak announced they wanted to relaunch the Super 8 camera, which I think a lot of people is still expecting. We saw a clear new way that this would probably be interesting for a lot of people. And if there is a new camera, which is kind of complicated, because especially on Super 8 and 16, there is a lot of parts moving at the same time. The shutters are continuously open. Well, it's circular, but they need a bit more maintenance than the classic ones, even rangefinder or SLRs. So we've been struggling a bit. We've tried everything we could, like the Lomo tanks, the Jobo tanks, and everything. And finally, thanks to in the forum in Facebook, we saw there is a guy in Ukraine that is actually custom building a very compact Super 8 and 16 millimeters developer. It doesn't have all the features. It doesn't have automatic replenisher and everything. But we are working with him to make one for us. If I'm fortunate enough, I will go to Ukraine at some point in summer to meet him, and we wish we will have a Super 8 16 millimeter developer by the end of December in Spain.
Very, very cool.
Yeah, scanning is not that big of a deal for us, because we know people who does the job very, very well, especially even for cinema and stuff like this. But developing, having a reliable source, it's complicated. I know there is we've been in touch with a company in Germany, which is called Silver Salz 35.
We
I
have them,
think
by
that.
the way, in our next
Oh, okay, super
and also
interesting.
the responsible person of Kodak Motion Picture, Mr. Antonio
Okay.
Lazura, will be
Wow.
there in our next chat. So I think there will be some interesting things about motion
Okay.
picture from
Yeah,
60
definitely.
millimeter
I
to 70
will.
millimeter. So
I'm not gonna miss that one then. And we were in touch with them also because I mean they know us and we know what they do, and I think they did an amazing work building their own machine. It's crazy. Like I don't even know how much the effort that has been into that. But I think motion film it's the next step. Perhaps it's a bit more like the cost of it and shooting, it's a bit more complex, but I think even it's blending into the professional market quite a lot, which I think it's going to be a bit the opposite as with what still photography is doing. That I think it's moving from professional market to the more amateur or enthusiast market. And I think Super 8 is gonna go, Super 8 and 16 is gonna move up to the to complement. That's something I believe. I'm no like complete crazy about like film is the only way and you should ditch everything else. But I think it will coexist very naturally. The same way I have a vinyl record and I have a Spotify, I will have a digital camera and a compact and a film camera. Well, I don't have a digital camera yet, but like most of people. No, because I don't need it. Like it's because I don't work as a professional photographer anymore, so it's not something I'm required to use. But I know technology will keep evolving, and I'm very keen on to see what's gonna happen. So yeah.
well, Stephen moved into a more film noir set. Maybe that is a hint to his last thing, what was available on the internet about.
Yes, Stephen, we're looking for some major hint here. Come on, drop some hints for us.
Oh, look to the shadows is all I'll say. Yeah, I've got a launch coming in March, TBC at the moment. But what I'm doing with this product is something kind of special, which nobody's really done before. So I want to sort of keep the mystery for a little bit longer. It's working with a new company. It's taken me about 2.5 years to get off the ground. Yeah, it's hopefully going to make a bit of a splash, and people will be interested in it.
And it's film based, I hope so.
Yes, yeah.
Good. We just make sure. Good.
Yeah, it's not
it's
a digital
not a camera. It's not a camera. Can we just have a little bit more? Maybe
it's
not a thing, or what is it?
You're right. It's not a camera. I'll leave it there.
Okay. Okay. So there's not much left. So there's a lens or film. So yeah.
Great. Well, I think we're probably going to have to wrap up pretty soon. I just wanted to say that Stephen's new release things, these interesting videos are really piquing my curiosity. You can see them on YouTube as well, can't you, Stephen?
Yeah, it's on the Cosmo Photo YouTube channel. And also there's on the video, there's a mailing list that you can sign up to. And the people who sign up to the mailing list will be amongst the first to learn about the new products.
Do we also have to sign up, or are you going to send us maybe information up front? So something.
I'll send you information probably about half an hour before it launches.
Okay, good. Thank you. That's enough.
Gee, thanks. Okay. No, but we also have our Fireside Chat videos go up on YouTube a little while after we do them live. So if you happen to have missed any of the first 3, you can see them on our YouTube channel. And if you saw this one and think that somebody might be interested in seeing it afterwards, we will also have it going up on our YouTube channel in a week or so. And as we mentioned, our next one is going to be about cinematography. We're going to have some very, very interesting guests. As we mentioned, Kodak Motion Picture, the person who's responsible for Kodak Motion Picture in Europe.
We will have a director of photography there.
That's right, who's worked with some of the biggest names in Hollywood. We'll have Zobazad 35. It's going to be a really interesting show. So I hope everybody will come back and join us for that.
Bellamy Hunt also.
And of course, how could I forget Bellamy Hunt, the Japan camera hunter. So yeah, it's really going to be an all-star cast, as it were, for cinematography edition next time. That's in 2 weeks on Saturday. And we're also coming out with a new issue of SilvergrainClassics very soon, issue 10, which will feature some beautiful images from Bruce that he was talking about, some of his new images that he has found. And also, I think we can announce it right now. Our cover artist for issue 10 is going to be Helmut Newton, and we have a very interesting new take on his work, which I hope people will enjoy. So don't miss that. And I thank everyone for joining us, particularly our panelists for coming from all over the world and taking their time and being so generous. And thank everybody for joining us from the audience. And we hope that we will see you again in 2 weeks.
Thank you very much. See you then. Goodbye.
Bye.
Thank you so much.